Hi, welcome to Jet Radio. I'm Ted Shire, your host, and Jet Radio is committed to community service as a means of sustainability. Today, our guest is Susan Aram, and she is with the Sustainable Iowa Land Trust, or SILT.org, and she has a lot of good information to share with us today. I'll have Susan introduce herself and her work in a couple of minutes here. Susan, welcome.
Thank you.
And just a few introductory remarks. Today, sustainability is a very important topic, but the more people are involved in the community, the more sustainable it will be. And increasingly, we need that kind of involvement because as we've divested neighbor-to-neighbor assistance and abdicated that to the government, that's resulted in programs that don't work quite as well. And it's not sustainable because agencies are overwhelmed. So people-to-people programs are going to be more and more needed. And so let's go ahead and get started. Susan, introduce yourself and your work.
Well, my name is Susan Aram. I moved to Iowa when I was 17 to go to the University of Iowa. I fell in love with Iowa. Unfortunately, work took me away. And when I came back a few years ago, I realized that we were in big trouble. We had young people trying to gain access to land to farm with this blossoming local food movement, but they couldn't get in. And at the same time, we have this massive land transition going on. Our elderly are passing on, and the question of what's going to happen to their farmland is in jeopardy. And we looked around trying to find any organization that was ready to guarantee that our land would stay in healthy food production, and we couldn't find anyone. So after talking to farmers and sustainable agricultural leaders and planners and developers all over the state for 2 years, we finally launched the Sustainable Iowa Land Trust to protect land to grow healthy food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and tell us about SILT.
Well, we're excited. You know, we have a network across the state, although we're constantly still networking, of professionals and activists and folks from all walks of life and all across the political spectrum excited about this kind of project. It's a way to rejuvenate and re-energize our rural communities. It's a way to get our young people back on the land. It's a way to secure our local food movement. It's a way to help our public health issues of obesity and diabetes. I don't think anyone will argue that a tomato is healthier than a Twinkie. So if we can get our kids out there and our immigrant communities out there and everyone else out there growing healthy food, we're going to see a whole resurgence here in Iowa of a diversity of a farm economy that we haven't seen in a long time.
Yeah, no, that's good. Tell us about the types of people in the networks.
Well, we pulled together developers, farm activists, Save the Family Farm activists, Republican leaders, Democratic leaders, planners from counties all over the state, because we know planners kind of had that crystal ball, you know, along with developers of where are the houses going next. And we want to work with them to incorporate these kinds of farms, small neighborhood-friendly farms, into the growth of our communities.
Yeah.
We've got conservationists. You know, we've got people who've been farming 40 years in a sustainable way. So, and we've got young people who've been stepping up saying, what can I do to help?
Yeah. And what about scientists?
Scientists. Well, we do have some scientists. Mostly we refer to their work. My husband actually is an anthropologist who wrote the book Pigs, Profits, and Rural Communities. He edited it back in the early 90s. That was a compilation of papers from other scientists and activists and farmers that predicted what confined animal feeding operations would do to Iowa. Unfortunately, they were correct. Things didn't go so well for our environment and for our rural communities when they came in. But also we refer to the scientists, for example, at the University of Iowa who studied the Veterans Affairs patients, 1,800 of them, and concluded that if they lived within a mile of a confined animal feeding operation, they had a 2.7 times higher chance of getting MRSA, MRSA, or the antibiotic-resistant problems.
Yeah. And so have you discovered resources for helping with that problem in terms of concentrated feedlots?
Well, we're not exactly going to try to stop anybody from doing the kind of farming that they're doing.
Yeah.
What we're offering is an additional kind of farming, a kind of farming that provides food right here in Iowa. We have some of the best soils in the world, as everyone knows, and we've allowed our food farming to be relegated to California and Florida, when 11 months of the year we can grow a lot of our food here. Maybe we can't grow lemons and oranges, but we can certainly grow a lot of other things that are healthy for Iowans, between hoop houses, greenhouses, and just our great summer climate.
Okay. What 11 months? 11 months out of 12 months.
Yeah.
What so what about what limits that 1 month that's left out?
Well, let's say, maybe we're not limited, but let's say in January when it's 30 or 40 below, it may not be as sustainable to be trying to heat your greenhouse, even with solar panels, than it would be to perhaps buy those vegetables from a state or two below, south of us. I don't know. I haven't done the math on that, but I like to assume that maybe January is a pretty rough month to be growing greens even. We have some folks doing it, but I wouldn't want to put it out there that everyone in Iowa could make a living doing that, given the harshness of January.
Sure. Yeah, I asked the question before about the feedlot operations, because what you have in Silt is a land trust, and you do have some stipulations in there about how to manage the land.
Right.
Tell us about that.
Okay. So our first name is sustainable, and I understand that word has been diluted over time by various interests. But to us, a sustainable farming operation is pretty much as closed loop as it can be. You put in as much energy as you get out. You don't use more calories going in than you get coming out, and it also means something that that's healthy for the environment, healthy for the community, and healthy for the farmer too. The farmer has to be able to make a living. The community should be benefiting from that farm in the area, which often means a smaller farm operation that actually purchases from the local community for its subsistence and its equipment. And it has to be healthy for the environment. So that would be a diversified farming operation, perhaps a perennial farming operation. Lots of fruits and nuts, for example, in Iowa. You never disrupt the soil again once you've planted them. Or some organic operations. Organic isn't the only sustainable, and not all organic is sustainable. So I don't like to make those synonymous. But there's plenty of organic operations or certified naturally grown operations that we can look to for certain models of making the operation itself sustainable. But confined animal feeding operations are not sustainable.
Yeah.
You can't put that many hogs in one place and have that much effluent and call it sustainable.
Right. And have you researched, or are you associated with people that research maybe some ways that those current operations can be made more sustainable in terms of digesters or technologies that can help us to make a transition to a more sustainable operation?
Well, I think if you're going to take a 13,000 hog facility and put digesters on it, you're putting lipstick on a pig, almost literally. Okay, so I'm sorry. I mean, economically, they're not sustainable because they're not beholden to the local community. Where there were hundreds of hog farmers before, there's now one person running that facility. So where did all those hog farmers go, and how are they feeding their families? There's, the whole nutrient issue is just, I don't think we've dealt with it. Iowa State, some people at Iowa State, their job, according to the people I spoke to, was to figure out how to keep that effluent from smelling bad. I'm not sure that's the solution here. I think the solution is having dispersed manure production so that you don't have to deal with so much of it in one place. So no, I'm not convinced there's too much you can do with a 13,000 head operation in one, small footprint.
Yeah.
That would make it sustainable.
Yeah. I've heard that because of the water weight, it makes transportation costs of manure. It precludes that being economical. But if you dry it off, then that can maybe make it more economical. But yeah, we've got a problem with concentrated feedlots.
Yeah. Like I said, every farmer has a right to farm the way he or she chooses.
Yeah.
We're not here to make anyone to demonize anyone's way of life or way to feed their families. But if we're talking about sustainable farming operations, let's be specific about what those look like. I mean, our best guess now as to what's sustainable, right? Land trusts are nonprofit organizations that have 200 and 300-year time horizons. So we don't know what science and new knowledge will give us in even 50 years in terms of what sustainable is. But we can see the damage that some of our farming operations do now to the environment, and we see less damage being done by other kinds of operations. Now, there's a trade-off there. Sometimes people will say, but you make less yield, or you can't feed as many people with that, or any number of things. Like in organic, they say you cultivate too much. In other words, you tear up the soil a lot to fight the weeds instead of using chemicals. Well, how could that be any better? That creates soil erosion. Well, let's have that conversation. That's fine. But what I don't want to do is debate with someone about whether or not the way they farm is legitimate. I'm not going to do that. I think everyone goes into farming and does what they do because they're full-grown adults that have made conscious decisions about what they need. And there's no judging that. There's no judging that. But we only really want to talk to the folks in terms of land donations and that sort of thing, of folks who want to see sustainable fruit and vegetable and small livestock production close to our communities. It's a select group of Iowans, but it's an avid and passionate group, and they've been coming out of the woodwork to talk to us ever since we went public in January. So we're pretty excited.
Sure. Yeah. It's not about judgment at all.
Right.
It's about what's sustainable, and the fact that it doesn't a sustainable operation doesn't have to be uneconomical, and in fact, just the reverse.
Yeah.
It
has to be economical. Yeah.
I mean, we're pro ag, we're pro business, and we want farmers to do well. It's just that we want things to be sustainable as well, and we don't want to throw the best land in the world down the Mississippi.
Right.
So.
Or even under the tarmac.
Yeah. I mean, Rick Cruz was here recently, and he was mentioning, the volunteer system isn't working, and it isn't. So we do need stronger regulation, and we need to protect that land because it's too valuable of a resource. And there's an educational component, and do you not have an educational component as part of SILT, or is that not correct?
Our very name is an education.
Okay.
Right? So, I mean, everything we do and everything we talk about is an education. I say farm to somebody, and all they see is a 4-letter word. All right, so we have to start there. They say farms in our communities. What? Why would we want that? Because, of course, they have a certain vision of what a farm looks like. And we need to get them back to the place where farms are friendlier for you to walk on and for your kids to play on and to have in your neighborhood. And our policymakers, a week after we launched, we were up at the Capitol, and we had Joe Bolcom and Bobby Kaufman at the same pedestal, at the same podium, speaking about the need to preserve our farms. I think we need the most progressive Democrat in the state and an up-and-coming Republican leader in the House, coming together to say this is relevant and important for Iowa. That's an education. When we go out and talk about what's sustainable, what's healthy, those are all educational components. So as we grow, maybe we'll be able to hire staff to do that. But for the moment, all the volunteers who are involved now, they all get it, and they're more than happy to talk to people about what we mean by these things and how we can reclaim that word sustainable for agriculture and for our food system.
Yeah. And how many farmers do you talk to?
How many farmers do we talk to?
Yeah.
I get, I don't know, scores of calls every week. And the people we've spoken to in the last couple of years, and, hundreds at the Practical Farmers of Iowa conference, or at the Moses conference in La Crosse, or at Women Food and Agriculture Network. We're always talking to farmers, and those are the landowners that we're talking to, generally. Yeah. We have some people who own acreages who want to donate those, but we're frequently talking to farmers.
Yeah. Just trying to get a sense of how many farmers are on board.
We just started. Well, first of all, our board is guaranteed to be 1/3 farmers at all times, working farmers. And we have a nice geographic disbursement of that right now. We have one from the Okoboji area, we have one from Atlantic, and one from the southeast, Wapello, south of Muscatine. And we have scores of farmers on our advisory council. These are well-known farmers to a lot of people: Denise O'Brien, Francis Tickey, Kathy Dice, and Tom Wall. Bobby Kaufman and his dad Jeff Kaufman are farmers, and we're continuously adding to that list, because those are the folks who are going to inform us about what kind of farmers should we allow onto silt land when we have it, and what is a sustainable farm operation, and how much land do you need to make a living if you're growing certain things, and where is the market, and are there too many farmers in that particular market? Does that mean we're going to suffocate them? We look at all of that, but I count on people smarter than I am, with better experience than I have, to make those decisions. We call on them for that.
Yeah. No, real glad for all the work that you're doing there. Today, our guest is Susan Arum, and she is with the Sustainable Iowa Land Trust. And we will continue our discussion on the issue of land management and soil sustainability when we come back in a minute or so. Thanks for being with us today. This is a very relevant issue.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
I'm Brian Leach, owner of Service Legends, and my position is Chief Talent Officer.
I'm Nicholas Wonderscheid.
I am Bernie Hobbs,
And I'm the Service Manager.
Marketing Director and Client Relations Manager.
Everything that we do is about ensuring that we exceed your expectations.
Our clients are important to us. 100% satisfaction.
We're not just focused on heating and cooling. That's the easiest part of our job, actually, is fixing furnaces and air conditioners.
Everyone that we come in touch with, we want to improve lives.
Bottom line is, we've got our installation guarantees, 25% energy savings guarantee, comfort guarantee, temperature selection guarantee, property protection guarantee.
100% satisfaction guaranteed. Fixed rate or it's free.
All of those guarantees are backed up with a 100% money-back guarantee to hold ourselves accountable to making sure that you get what you're after.
Just fixing the problem today. If they have another problem 5 days down the road, it's still fixed rate or it's free.
We use what's called straightforward pricing. Our technicians are going to give you an exact to-the-penny price on what it's going to take before they move forward with any repair. That way you know what to expect.
It's the same price every day.
No surprises.
If you get off work at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you come home, you realize that, oh, my furnace is broken. Now you need to call somebody out that night. You shouldn't have to pay more for that.
We're guaranteeing service 24/7.
We run afternoons, evenings, nights, weekends. We're staffed to work that.
Phone rings at 3 in the morning. You'll get one of our representatives answering the phone every time.
We're not sending you out to Timbuktu in some call center. It's our Service Legend team members, our mission control team,
I'll take a call anytime.
and then they answer the phones the same way during the day as they do at night.
It's a great day at your service company. How can we make you smile?
That's the only way to provide true 24-hour service.
When you're able to let somebody actually live in their home safely when they weren't able to do that before, where they don't have to stay up at night and worry about, is the heat going to come back on? Are we going to freeze the pipes? Is the baby in the room next door going to be sick because they got too cold? When you're able to help somebody overcome challenges like that, that's impacting a life. That makes a difference. I get goosebumps thinking about it.
I love the team. I love the people that I work with.
We have fun, but we work hard.
I call them my ambassadors of legendary service. If you could just envision what that is, that's who we're sending to your home.
They literally will call in, pick up the phone and call and say, hey, I want to talk to your manager. And I get on the phone, they're like, that technician that was at my house was the greatest technician ever. That's cool to me.
We want to brighten people's days.
Every person that we have going into the house has gone through an extensive background check.
Drug testing, we have a very thorough interview process that 1 out of 140 people make it through.
If we promise you something, that's what you're going to get, no matter what.
We're here when you need us to protect the safety and comfort of your family.
If you're not happy, we're gonna make it right.
If we're willing to put 100% money-back guarantee on what we do, what type of work do you think we do?
Give us a call. We're there for you 24/7, 365 days a year.
Enough said.
Hi, welcome back to Jet Radio. I'm Ted Char, your host, and with us today is Susan Arum with the Sustainable Iowa Land Trust. Welcome back, Susan.
Thank you.
So let's talk about slow money
Sure.
for a little bit. Tell us what that concept means.
Slow money is the concept of withdrawing your resources from Wall Street, which is such an abstraction, and bringing it down to earth right here in our communities in the terms of investing in our local food and farm initiatives. Woody Tash was a venture capitalist who wrote a book about slow money in about 2008. And before he knew it, the whole idea had taken off. And now they've had 5 national gatherings. Last year in Kentucky, they had more than 800 people there. And these are gatherings with an opportunity for extremely wealthy people to connect with those farmers and entrepreneurs who are looking for that kind of help. It's not a philanthropy, it's an investment vehicle. So the people there are not there to give their money away, but they're there to invest it and get some return. But like a lot of impact investors, they're often willing to take less of a return than top dollar because they also see the social impact in return that they get. So we were invited to present on stage. There were about 100 applicants, 21 of us got to get up there, and we each got 6 minutes, and then there was a panel discussion sort of thing, question and answer. And when it was all over, the attendees there voted for us to win a $20,000 interest-free loan, which is just the kind of thing slow money would do, an interest-free loan. We do have to pay it back at the end of 3 years. But isn't that a treat? And it was people who really know business who were voting for us. So we think, well, they must have thought we had something good here with Silt.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're pretty excited about it. Not to mention all the wonderful connections I made there that are still paying off. People calling and asking how are things going out there, what kind of investment opportunities do you have for us? We'd like to talk more about how we can invest in Silt or in your farmers. And it's just a wonderful conversation. I got to thank Woody for all of that. He's the one that's keeping it going.
Yeah. Well, no, I think that's an excellent point to drive home. What's more important than the best soil in the world?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you've got a good investment product there.
Right. I guess so. Yeah.
You know, I guess it doesn't necessarily belong to any of us, in you know, at its root level.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in terms of a long-term investment, agriculture is going to become more important. The soil is going to become more important. Water is going to become more important.
Right.
So, how do you think you can use that, you know, the long-term value of soil and agriculture to draw in investors?
Oh, I don't think it's going to be hard. I think there are some authors out there who've done the job for us, like Michael Pollan or Francis Moore Lepay. I mean,
Tell us about that. Tell us more about that.
Omnivore's Dilemma and all of this. These people on the coast they're clearly educated about what's going on in Iowa in terms of a monoculture and in terms of crops that are heavily dependent on petrochemical fertilizers, and they already know that they would love to see change in the Corn Belt in terms of our food supply. So I don't even have to talk them into it. Like I said, these people came up to me in the hallways and said, "So glad to see something's finally happening in Iowa." I thought, since when does Iowa make the map? You know, with people from New York and California, but it did.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the investment here is how can we secure as much land as possible for the next generations that will grow healthy food. You know, the land is not there to serve us. We're part of a much bigger picture, right? We're part of the universe, and our job is to figure out how to play well with the rest of the universe, I think. And sustainable farming, I think, is a great way to do that. And so if we can protect that land in perpetuity to only grow healthy food, I think we're leaving quite a legacy. And we're treating the earth with the respect it deserves as well.
Yeah. So in conversation, you mentioned that there are limitations on corporate investment in buying Iowa land. Tell us a little bit about that, and then contrast it with individual investment.
Right. Well, this is something we're still exploring. So the Sustainable Iowa Land Trust is a nonprofit land trust. So we're a 501c3, which enjoys all the charitable tax deductions that a 501c3 does. But we're exploring what are possibilities for this investment side, for these investors from others outside the state or inside the state to help support farmers who want to farm this way and farm this kind of crop. And those conversations are still happening, but we've had people involved from investment firms to farmers who are just very familiar with 9H, which is the code, the anti-corporate ownership law in Iowa. And we just have, like, a lot of people smarter than I am in a room trying to figure out how to do this for good. Now, those laws are in place for good reason. We don't want corporations owning our farms. And I'm glad of those laws. But they limit corporate ownership to 1,500 acres, for example. They limit the number of people who can be involved in that corporation to that ownership. And we are just trying to figure out how to, within the within the confines of the law to assist these slow money investors in hooking up with the kinds of farmers that they want to help. So, for example, the land trust model is going to be that on land that we own, we'll keep it, and farmers will get long-term leases on those parcels, and they can pass those leases on to their kids. I mean, we don't really care who farms it, we care how they farm it. And the farmers will own the house, barn, and business on top of the land, and that's where they'll gain their equity. If over time they want to sell or retire, they'll gain in the improvements they've made on those things. But they won't gain any money on land speculation because we've taken land out of the equation. The land stays with the land trust. But we also know there are some farmers who don't want to buy into that, or they might want to start out on land trust land but end up on property they can buy themselves. Well, we may need some assistance from some of these slow money investor types to provide beneficial loan terms to these kinds of farmers where banks may not be interested in or may not want to take the risk.
Yeah. So are there various ways that you would get land through donation, through direct donation of land, or cash donations by which you could buy land? How does that all work?
Right. Well, there'll be a few avenues. One will be definitely direct donations. That's all we can really expect for the first 3 to 5 years. The law provides for some very beneficial tax benefits to people who donate land to a land trust or donate easements, which is those restrictions on land that lower their value, their economic value at least. There are really nice tax benefits to that. People should talk to their tax experts about those benefits, but they're above and beyond anything you get from a charitable donation to a standard nonprofit.
Nice.
But by the same token, land trusts are held to a higher standard. You know, we don't want, and the IRS doesn't want, people using a land trust as a tax dodge, right? So, for example, if somebody donates land to us, well, then we own it. That's an asset for us. If they donate an easement, which is really a responsibility that we take on in perpetuity to protect that land. In other words, the family or the person retains ownership and they can buy and sell it as they choose, but they've put this restriction on it that goes with the deed that says this land will only ever grow healthy food, okay, whatever that definition is that we come up with. Then it's the land trust responsibility to enforce that easement every year. Every year we go out there, we see the land, we see what's going on it, we build a relationship with whoever's farming it at the time. That's an expense. And so to secure that, we always ask for a cash donation when it comes to easements, because we want to show the IRS and the world that we're being responsible, that we have the money in the bank to afford that protection in perpetuity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that the tax benefits are above and beyond.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I suspect it has to do with the value of land in general and the size of the kinds of contributions we're talking about. I don't know the history of the tax law, but one example is that depending on the value of a donation here in Iowa, up to you can get as much as $100,000 tax credit that carries forward 20 years on your Iowa taxes. Now, the value of your donation has to be $200,000 or more for that to happen, but still, $100,000 tax credit, not a deduction, and you can carry it forward 20 years. That's pretty significant. There's no other, as far as I know, there's no other tax credit like that for a standard regular donation of anything.
Sure. And could that apply to both in-state and out-of-state investors?
Investors are a different ballgame, remember. This is a donation. Donation is philanthropy. Investors are looking to get their money back with a little on top. That's a different ballgame.
Okay.
So that they don't get tax breaks. They get their investment. They get their return on investment. So an investor comes in and buys 100 acres, and they put a farmer on it. That farmer buys it back from them with interest, right? That's their return. They don't get any tax breaks for that.
Yeah.
There are some beginning farmer tax breaks in Iowa, but that's a different ballgame entirely. I don't want to really go there. It's really complicated.
Yeah, no. Thanks for the clarification. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
But, we've got Donald Trump in town today, and, individuals could make a huge difference in terms of, investing in land or whatever. What's your feeling about that?
I think there's an incredible opportunity coming, and everyone sees it. And you can see them as altruistic, or you can see them as opportunistic, or you can just see them as vultures. I don't know, but everyone sees this land transition coming. A third of our land is owned by people over 75. Half of our land is owned by people over 65, and none of us is going to live forever. And Donald Trump, the Buffetts, whoever's in town looking at land, I think you have to look at what is their vision. What is their vision for Iowa in the future? What is Bruce Rastetter's vision of Iowa in the future? I don't know. You know, these folks are not people I hang around with very much. But I know that we're putting forward a vision of multiple local food farms all over our growing communities in different sizes and different shapes. Some of them like community gardens for churches. Some of them large school gardens maybe, but large, large enough to actually be a farm. But fruit and vegetable doesn't need 5,000 acres, They need maybe 10 acres for a family to live on. I see agroforestry on these farms, using trees and the natural ecology of the forest to grow, anything from ginseng to shiitakes to pigs, acorn-fed pork belongs in our savannas. So that's the vision we're putting forward. We import 90% of our food. There's obviously a market there because the last time I checked, Iowans had never stopped eating, right? So we want to eat. We'd love to eat locally. As the gas prices, fuel prices go up, as the drought strikes California, these are all warning signs that we need to do things differently.
Absolutely.
And here's a perfectly good opportunity, and we can learn from all the other land trusts who have been doing it for 40 years because there's ones on the coast that have been. So let's learn from their mistakes. Let's learn from their lessons and do it even better here in Iowa and provide that vision. In addition to golf courses and city parks, let's have food-producing green spaces as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, so you said different shapes and sizes.
Yeah.
So the individual agreements are customizable.
Mm-hmm.
And what are there limits to the customization?
Yeah, I imagine there is, right? I mean, when we start drilling down into these agreements with various landowners, and we've started more than a dozen conversations with landowners representing about 2,000 acres in Iowa already. But as we just launched in the end of January, so there's only so many in-depth conversations we've had. But we did launch with one farm donated, 40 acres south of Sheridan. And, though it's, what grows best on that land? First, we have to check the soils. We have to look at the topography. We have to see what's timber already, what's tillable. Is there a water source on the property? How many homesteads or farmsteads are on the property? How many farmsteads or homes is the owner willing to consider 100 years from now? Can we leave a 5-acre envelope around the current farmstead just in case various farm operations grow and shrink over time? Because you never know with the next owner exactly what they're going to need. So yes, each conversation is highly individualized, but at some point, especially with easements, that one where we're responsible over time to just go out and visit them all the time, they can only be so detailed before they would just bankrupt us, right? Iowa Natural Heritage is the oldest and greatest conservation land trust in Iowa. As far as I understand, it's the oldest. And even they have a limit on what they're willing to agree to. Their best example is a landowner who said, I want to protect my land from hunting in perpetuity. And they just shake their head and said, we can't do that. We can't be out there looking over your 300 acres in northwest Iowa every day, right? And keep people from hunting. Can you imagine the expense, right? So there'll be some limits. And for example, I talked to a corn and soybean farmer in Johnson County who said, what if I don't agree on what sustainable means? I said, if we have a series of conversations and we can't agree on the most basic sense of what sustainable is, and even if you won't let us wait until the next generation to employ more sustainable practices, if you're not up for any of that, then we shake hands and politely say goodbye. And she said, why? How could you do that? I said, because sustainable is our first name. So, you have to only talk to the folks who are really, kind of with the program.
Sure.
We don't want to try to talk somebody into something that they don't really believe in. What's the point?
Sure. No, that's right. What's the point if you don't have those basic tenets in there?
Right.
And what would those be?
the basic tenets of sustainability.
Yeah.
Well, we have these on our website at silt.org. They're very broad right now, but our farmers and some others on a committee are working up details. But basically, practices that build soil health and improve water quality and don't harm air quality, and provide a living for the farmer. So we tend to think in terms of more diversified operations, if possible, operations that disrupt the soil if little possible, that build the microbiology of the soil, that reduce our reliance on petrochemical fertilizers, insecticides, the things that are closer at hand that we can use, the knowledge and our own hard work that's closer at hand that we can use, the more sustainable it probably is.
Yeah. No, thanks so much for your work. Today we're with Susan Arum. She is with SILT, the Sustainable Iowa Land Trust. And we will continue our discussion on land management and soil sustainability after another break.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Credit cards are like grandkids. They love you, sometimes get out of control, and it's fun to get a new one. Who can stop them from piling on?
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of Des Moines. At the end of the day, you can give these grandkids back, but you're stuck paying off bad credit card debt. We can help you put the fun back into using credit cards responsibly. Right, kids?
Yeah! If you need help getting credit cards off your back, call Consumer Credit of Des Moines.
Hi, welcome back to Jet Radio. I'm Ted Char, your host, and Susan Arum is with us today. She is the president of SILT, the Sustainable Iowa Land Trust, president of the board, and we're continuing our discussion on soil sustainability and land management. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So we mentioned some of the things that are going on in California, and I think it's concerning us all. And Jet put out a newsletter a few weeks ago on the wild fluctuations in the jet stream.
Yeah.
That's creating the drought out west and the record snows out east. And those are becoming long-term patterns. We're drying out in the west and getting wetter where the jet stream dips. And so, it brings up this issue of, hey, how long is this going to go on? Do we really know what's happening to the water out there in the areas where it's dry? And, really there isn't a good handle on how much they've lost, how much they've got left. And so that leaves them in a position where they could run out one day without knowing it. They could be caught off guard in certain areas. And of course, that's not going to happen all at once. But yeah, in certain spots, that kind of thing's going to happen. What do you think the implications are if California begins to drain their aquifers, run out of water, and what does that mean for the agricultural industry out there, and give us some perspective on how water is used out there?
Well, first of all, Californians might move to Iowa.
Yeah.
I think we need to guard against that, don't you think?
Yeah.
So, but seriously.
No, I didn't. I didn't know what you were going to say there.
I'm just joking.
So.
But seriously, though, the agricultural industry in California has never been held to task when it comes to its water use. Been using 90% of the water sources there for decades, and nobody's talked about it. And we're trying to grow really good food and rather large cities in the middle of a desert. And I think, those chickens are coming home to roost. I don't look forward to that. I like my citrus, and I like, the bananas I get from South America, but if we keep letting our food travel this far, we're going to suffer the high cost. That's the first thing we're going to notice, right, is the high cost of the food. But then I think we'll notice the scarcity of the food. There's only so much. There's only so much money can buy, and eventually, if there's no water, there's no water. I heard the other day on the radio that it takes more water to grow an almond than it does to grow a tomato. I know from a lot of the climate change information I've been reading that the one thing we can count on in Iowa is unpredictability. The weather is going to become more unpredictable and more extreme. We can't predict the future, and we can't hedge against every possibility, but we can try to build for resilience. That's why we think a diversity in farming operations helps. Thousands and thousands of acres of apricots or almond groves is just as unsustainable as thousands of acres of corn or soybean. We don't see our forests that look like that. Our oceans don't look like that. Mother Nature knows that you need a good mix of things so that when the plague comes to one crop, you've got something else, right, that's having a good year.
Sure.
So I don't know what to tell you about the water, except it's not good. Things have to change.
Well, no, and even the reverse migration that you alluded to, that's an important issue because California is the most populous state. And actually, if there was a huge water crisis, people would begin to move.
Yeah.
And if you have the most populous state moving elsewhere, we really don't want to take a lot of the world's best soil and convert it to urban sprawl.
Right.
We need to reserve the best soil for food production.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe in a good sense, it could result in higher pressure to produce human food instead of commodities.
Maybe.
What's your sense of that?
Well, I think so. I think we have to get smarter about how we're growing our food and where we're growing it. Yeah, it hasn't been in the news lately because gas prices are down, but as long as we stay dependent on other countries for everything that moves our vehicles and everything that heats our homes, we're at great risk. So why not move our food production closer to our people? When we can, right?
Yeah.
We don't. I'm not Pollyannish. Like I said, I like my banana in the morning. So, I'm not a purist this way, but I just think there's so much distance we can go before we even get uncomfortable. There's so many changes we can make now if we want to, and I'm not convinced it's all an individual choice. There's a lot of corporate power out there that's helping determine our food system. So that can be pretty daunting to think that we'd have to speak up against some pretty entrenched corporate interests and the folks that they support in our halls of Congress.
Yeah. So you mentioned human food production, and that's a theme that we've had several times here. How much area does it take to grow human food?
Yeah,
for
Iowa.
Starting with Iowa.
Yeah. A recent study, 2014, came out. Angie Tagtow, who's pretty well known here in Iowa as a researcher as of late, although I think she's gone off to the federal government now for a little while. She helped produce a report that showed that we'd only have to convert 123 acres per county to be able to feed every Iowan the USDA daily allowance for nutrition.
Yeah.
I think that's astonishing. It's just a fraction of most people's farms.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, by the way, that 5 years ago she did a study and she kind of glossed over this idea of how many acres. She was focusing on something else, and she referred to this need as it would take thousands of acres to feed Iowans in food. But then 5 years later, she focused on it and went, "Oh my God!" I could just see her as a researcher going, "Whoa, really? Only 123 acres? I mean, that's doable. That's doable.
Yeah.
If we're smart about it."
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's comforting in the sense that we have a great buffer.
Mm-hmm.
But we may need that buffer.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So we're talking. We did the quick calculation.
Right. Right.
Right on
What is
break
it?
here, but
0.03% or something.
0.03%.
Yeah. A fraction of a fraction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's great news. We need a lot of buffer.
Yeah.
Because
we're paving over 25 acres a day.
Yeah.
Right now, we're paving over 25 acres a day.
Yeah.
What can we do to get smarter about that?
Yeah. But think about if the dry area, we all know that we're undergoing climate change.
Mm-hmm.
If the dry areas dry out, I mean, and 40%, as Rick Cruz was mentioning, 40% of our food is grown on irrigated land.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and a lot of that's irreplenishable aquifers.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have a huge percent of the world's food that's vulnerable.
Right.
So we need a huge buffer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're doing a great thing. I'm so glad for your work.
There are methods out there, to capture rainwater. Not just we don't have to get, maybe at a certain industrial scale, we have to keep pulling it out of the ground. But, most food production can capture rainwater and use it when they need it. And that includes not only giant cisterns and man-made things, but capturing rainwater in swales and berms. We can do the earthworks like the Chinese did thousands of years ago, right? I mean, you look at the sides of hills in Southeast Asia, and you see that they figured it out. They use the very shape of the ground to hold water. And if we could think beyond the next quarter or beyond the next season to 3 to 5 years out, and start capturing that water better and moving it to places on the ground where we need it, we'll see the difference. There's people out there doing it already.
Yeah. Sometimes doesn't it amaze you at the failure to do the obvious sometimes? Because, we're I think California is an important topic to continue talking about. They are not using sustainable irrigation techniques.
Right.
A lot of that water is wasted.
Oh, I can't stand to watch the water flying up in the air with those sprinklers. I mean, really? You're sprinkling water in a desert. Now, how much of that could possibly be hitting the ground?
Yeah.
Right? Whereas Israel's figured it out. They've generated some of the best irrigation systems in the world with their drip tape. They don't lose a drop. Every hole in that drip tape goes to a plant. And there's no holes in between watering the soil. And there's certainly no water going up in the air. And drip tape now is becoming a more common thing in the U.S. A lot of it's imported from Israel.
Yeah. Is that where it was invented?
As far as I know, yes. That's not just our usual like soaker hoses, but actual drip tape.
Yeah. And is what percent of their agriculture is serviced by that technology?
Oh, I would imagine most of it, but I don't know.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, talk about growing food in a desert.
Yeah.
Right? So.
No, that is an outstanding reference. That's exactly the kind of thing that's needed in California and elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. But I'm sure it's more expensive than the systems they have in place now, right? So, it's a big course to change. You invest, I don't know what, millions of dollars, I suppose, these industries into a certain system. They're not about to go back and just change the system because they're a little short on water this year.
Sure.
Yeah, I wish they were, but.
We have to know where to spend. It's like when it comes to things like this, it's worth the money. It's worth the long-term investment. If we invest in the long term, it always yields more than the investment in time.
Well, if you're a stockholder in one of those companies that is sucking up the water out in California, you need to speak up. Most of us don't feel like being a stockholder in a company is gonna, we're not gonna have the voice with our little bit of shares from our little retirement savings account, right, that we can speak up. And I think that's where people get disillusioned and disheartened, that they can't change the corporate way of doing things. So you and I can agree that it's important to change that investment, but the real folks who make the decision are just those guys at the top, and, they don't want to upset their stockholders, the big stockholders, I think.
Yeah.
Generally.
Yeah. But, movements can change things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's an educational process, and there's a process of repetition. Mm-hmm. People hear the right things enough times, and eventually things start to change. But they need to hear. We need to get the relevant information out there, simplified form, repeat it over and over.
Right. Right.
And is that not part of your mission?
Absolutely, but we're focusing on Iowa. I've spent my lifetime organizing. I was a community organizer for a while, and I got picked up by a union, and I was a union organizer, and I organized janitors. I talk about some of the most powerless people on earth, most invisible people on earth. Even wrote a book about that. But if I keep thinking about the abstract, federal government, California, I don't want to get out of bed in the morning, because I feel like I can't make any change. But what I love about this project is it's very concrete. I can go out to Iowans. I can talk about the future of our food security. These people own land. A lot of them have never even thought about their land as anything but rental income that they inherited from their dad or mom, right? Or just something that generates, corn and soybeans. And they start thinking about it as something else. It suddenly their minds just get blown open. And they can say, wow, especially these elderly women who've never felt a whole lot of power about the ownership of land, because traditionally, our 80-year-old women now grew up in a rather traditional farm wife role, and the husbands dealt with the farm. Their husbands are gone. They own this land. They suddenly have this asset they've never thought much about. And when they call me up and say, you're the answer to all my problems. I wanted to protect this farm, and I didn't know how. And you mean I can just give it to you, and you'll take care of it? And it's astonishing to hear these responses. They're so relieved, and we can be concrete, and we can be real. And that land donation, we can almost guarantee that they'll meet the farmer, that young person who's going to come on there and grow fruits and vegetables before they're gone, And isn't that cool? Building a whole new community of people who otherwise wouldn't have met.
Yeah, let's stay there for a moment. So what do you do with the farm when you get that kind of response? Hey, I've been waiting for you.
Yeah.
Here it is.
Yeah.
Go to it. What is your ideal management situation?
Well, once we acquire the land from the donation, which is a working process. That takes time. These people have to run it by their family and friends. They usually get the response of, what are you, crazy? Why would you give away land? And then they kind of have to work through that themselves and say, no, I think my gut instinct was right. This is the right thing to do. And I've been watching this happen. It's pretty cool. Then we go through the process of the closing, and we get the land. Then the plan is to tap those networks of other really great nonprofits that are out there teaching this next generation how to farm and mentoring them. So in Iowa, the most obvious one is Practical Farmers of Iowa. They have a wonderful beginning farmer program, including a savings program and a mentoring program. But there's the Land Stewardship Project in Minnesota that bleeds over into Iowa. There's Moses, the Midwest Organics Educational Service in La Crosse that holds a huge organics conference every year, very well respected and attended. There's the Center for Rural Affairs over in Nebraska. We have, just in the Midwest, a great, deep resource of organizations that are getting these farmers trained up and ready to farm. It's just that no one has been willing or ready or able, because there's so much else to do, to tackle this ultimate daunting project of land ownership. Who's going to own it and who's going to protect it in perpetuity? And I figured, well, it's a biggie, but if I don't have to do anything else, maybe we can do that much,
Yeah.
And so that's why we're focusing just on that niche, and then draw on those other experts to kind of start feeding farmers to us.
Yeah. But give us the specifics on, okay, someone says, hey, here's the land. I want you to manage it.
Okay.
I want you to manage it. How will you manage it?
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have a farm that we own, right? And we put it out there. We say, okay, everybody, we have 40 acres south of Sheridan, right? And we talk to everybody, and they send us some farmers. Here's the deal they're going to get. If they're vetted by our board and our advisors as somebody who's ready to farm, who's done their homework, they've got a business plan, they've studied the market, they've gotten their backs aching and their hands hurting for a while, then we offer them, we'll probably start out with a trial run of a year or two, right, to see if everybody works out. But then, if they're qualified, we'll offer them a long-term lease. It could last as long as they want it to. They could pass it on to their kids if they want to. But it is a lease. And if it's on damaged ground, we'll lower the rent for the more sustainable practices they employ, just to help them get that soil back to where it needs to be. But the farmer, him or herself, will own the house, the barn, and the business on top of the land. So that's where they'll gain their equity. That's where they'll cash out later. So if they pass it on to their kids, or if they sell it, or they retire, they'll earn the improvements they make on the house, the barn, and the business. That'll be their long-term profit. But in the meantime, they're not sitting on millions of dollars of interest payments to a bank, right? When they're just trying to get up and running because they're not buying the land. They can plow almost all of their profit back into their farm operation instead of into an interest payment to a bank on a 30-year mortgage, right?
Yeah.
And that's how it's going to permanently reduce the cost of farming for sustainable food farmers. Now, on easements, where we just have the protection of the land, but we don't own the land, what we anticipate is that maintains really a low value for that land, right? Because there's only so many people who are going to buy it. No developers are going to want it, and no corn farmers are going to want it, or at least commodity farmers, because it has to grow healthy food, right? So those are the only kind of people who are going to see it, which means the value drops because it's a smaller pool of people. Well, that means that in perpetuity, that land will always cost less than the land around it for the next beginning farmer or the next farmer who wants to come along and grow healthy food.
Yeah.
So in both examples, we secure lower priced land so that farmers can finally farm. You know, they can put their money into their operations, their business, their barn, whatever they need.
Yeah. You're doing great work.
Thank you.
So
are you. So are you.
We ran out of time once again.
Right.
So as always happens, I could talk about this for a long time. But thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. Thanks for your good work here.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us today on Jet Radio. You've been with Susan Aram. She is the president of the board of the Sustainable Iowa Land Trust, silt.org. Thanks for joining us today, and make a difference for sustainability.